Thank you so much for coming today. Thanks for coming to Canzine West. And thank you for coming to see our special guest, the first ever special guest we've ever had at Canzine, Mimi Pond. We were so excited to have her today. My name is Alison Lang, and I'm the editor of Broken Pencil. And I live in Toronto, but I came up to Vancouver specifically for Canzine West this year, and I'm so happy to be here. And I've really been enjoying the event this year, and I hope you have as well. With no further ado, we're going to introduce our speaker and sort of set the scene for her talk today. So Mimi Pond is the cartoonist behind the New York Times bestseller Over Easy. I recently read Over Easy for the first time a few months ago. And as I told Mimi yesterday, I couldn't put it down and literally read it in one night, to which she responded, well, it took me 15 years to write it. So it's a 15-year labor of love. It's a wonderful book. I feel like it's in the pantheon of sort of memoir comics through a female perspective, like a young woman. And, you know, it fits in the mold almost of Alison Bechdel's Fun Home. Or Lisa Hannawalt's My Dirty Dumb Eyes. It's wry and acerbic, and it's such a wonderful story, and we're so happy to have Mimi here today. Mimi's also created comics for the Los Angeles Times, 17 Magazine, National Lampoon, and many other publications, and she's also written for television. Her credits include the first full-length episode of The Simpsons, Simpsons Roasting Over an Open Fire, and episodes of Designing Women and Pee-wee's Playhouse. She lives in Los Angeles, but she's come all the way here to Vancouver to tell you more about Over Easy. And basically, she's going to talk about Over Easy in the era that it's set, which is mainly the 70s. And I really love the description that she sent for us, in that most people under the age of 35 imagine the 70s to have been nothing but one big non-stop cocaine-fueled, glittering disco party. Mimi Pond thinks of it more as a dark moral swamp that she was left to navigate on her own. Some choices made in those days often led to frightening consequences. On the other hand, that very lack of moral judgment meant that one was freer to make one's own decisions without societal pressure to conform, vastly different from today's climate of the internet's harsh snap judgments. So I'm going to bring Mimi up on stage to tell you more about Over Easy. Please give a round of applause for Mimi.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And I just, realize that there's so many young people who really don't understand the context of the 70s the way they happened, the way they happened for me. So I thought I'd give you a little overview from my perspective and then do a reading from the book. Oh, that 70s show. It made the 70s seem like such fun. Well, it wasn't. You think of it as crazy bell-bottom pants and big splunky flowers and disco. You were really lucky if you'd even heard of Alex Chilton, who sang this theme song. Instead, jammed down your throat on Top 40 radio was music like this. Oh, the Starland Vocal Band with Afternoon Delight. Blech. All through my childhood, I'd been waiting to go to the wild hippie party that had been raging for years. Peace marches, rock concerts, love-ins. I was ready for the revolution, man. But then in 1969, this guy kind of spoils the party. Then 1970, these guys break up. And now this is what they're telling us to do? Have a nice day? We can't! The Beatles broke up! Why is it? Oh, hang on. Oh, here we go. It's like the dirty bong water just spilled in my mom's new shag carpet.
Baby. Yeah.
It gets worse. 1971, the Monkees break up, and then, almost and more ominously in the same year, the Captain and Tennille get together. With a man like you. 1972, Watergate. Everything we know is wrong.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Yeah, 1973, that's what our president said. Let's go back one more time and hear it.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Yeah, you got that? this musical question? And Nixon replies, apparently not. Lots of weird stuff was happening in 1974. 19-year-old newspaper heiress Patty Hearst is kidnapped from her apartment in Berkeley. And a lot of people seem to be sympathetic to her kidnappers, a tiny band in nut jobs called the Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA, even though the year before they killed the first black Oakland superintendent of schools, Marcus Foster. The SLA brainwashed poor Patty by locking her in a closet and gang raping her, had a giant fiery shootout with the cops in LA, got the media by the balls, dragged poor Patty from one end of the country to the other. For a while there, it was like Where's Waldo with Patty spottings all over the place. They even forced her to participate in a bank robbery. People really wanted to believe she was this privileged white girl who'd gone rogue. And in September of 1975, Patty Hearst was arrested and eventually convicted of the bank robbery. Also in 1975, Saigon fell. All that war for nothing. It gets worse. Up was down, black was white. People were looking for answers, and suckers were ripe for New Age picking. People wanted something to believe in, like firewalking, healing crystals, pyramid power, pyramid schemes, and gurus, from people like Werner Erhard, who founded EST, Erhard Seminar Training, where you couldn't take a bathroom break for 8 hours, and at the end you were supposed to get it, whatever that was. Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who owned a fleet of Rolls Royces and made his devotees wear the colors of the sun. And Jim Jones, who, you remember Jim Jones, don't you? Yeah, that Jim Jones. Was 1978 going to be even more depressing? Yeah. Guess what's #1 on the Billboard charts? But then, from out of the nether regions of Queens, New York, there's this.
Let's go!
And then still, 1976 was a battle royal for the souls of young America. Frampton Comes Alive sells like 6 million copies. One thing I'll say, his hair was perfect. Speaking of hair, also in 1976, Cher marries Greg Allman. Here's a tip. Never marry a man with hair prettier than your own. So 1976 was a big hair year. You had the Farrah, the Dorothy Hamill wedge, Bruce Jenner back when he was a man, had a shag that was Olympic. I can't really express the importance of hair in the 70s enough, so I'm just going to show you this.
We just washed the hair. You know, I work on my hair a long time, and you hit it. He hits my hair.
This is from the brilliant 1977 movie Saturday Night Fever. As great a movie as this was, it really represented a seismic shift in youth culture. You're either pro-disco or anti-disco. To me and my friends, these are just nylon acetate and polyester-clad zombies, dancing in lockstep. We were tired of perfect hair. Trying to put it into current context, all I can tell you is this. Dudes like this in the 70s were exactly the same as dudes like this. Same thing. This, that. Got it? Okay. But then there's hope. It's okay. It's in 1977, this charts, and everything was suddenly different. It's a good time to quit art school and start a band, man! Okay, I didn't do that. But a year later, I did quit art school and go to work as a dishwasher in Mama's Royal Cafe in Oakland, California. 1979, February 2nd, Sid Vicious kicks off the new year by dying at age 21 of a drug overdose. But also in 1979, the Dead Kennedys played the Mabuhay Gardens in San Francisco for the first time. Things were finally getting interesting. These are pictures from a book about club kids in the Bay Area from that period. This was the aspect of the punk movement I found most exciting. Do-it-yourself, street-level, thrift store fashion. I've never been very good at staying up late at nightclubs, so I can't really say I was on the scene that much, but I waited on all these people. I don't know who most of them are, but they all had stellar fashion sense. They knew better than to go to the mall and just consume. I showed this book to people I used to work with at the restaurant back then, and they knew everyone. They'd say things like, "Oh yeah, I used to buy speed from that guy." Or, Yeah, that guy kicked me down a flight of stairs once. So I'd like to take you on a more personal memory lane, down a more personal memory lane of the 1970s. This is the band of weirdos, degenerates, hippies, speed freaks, punks, drag queens, and teen creeps who started Mama's Royal Cafe back in 1974. From the very beginning, the restaurant was infused with a crazy, subversive spirit. This was our boss, the manager, our groovy beatnik dad, John Valia, also known as Nestor Marzipan. Everyone wanted to work there. He'd throw away people's carefully crafted resumes and ask them to tell him a joke or a dream. That's how you got the job. Nestor, in my book Over Easy, became Laszlo Merengue. So it was an unusual work environment. Casual Friday? Every day was Casual Friday. You could get away with a lot more back then than you can now. Nestor understood that sometimes a waitress just needs her breakfast wine. A typical staff meeting. Corporate culture would have no idea what to make of this business model. Think outside the box? There was no box. Team building exercises? Tequila is a team building exercise. Naturally, our restaurant had a mascot, our very own teenage delinquent drug dealer whose t-shirt really expresses the feeling of the moment. This is Peter Brady, who was the inspiration for the character, the Beeve, in Over Easy. Left to right, speed freak line cook, impressionable soon-to-be junkie dishwasher, drag queen hostess, drug dealer, lesbian prep cook. Those were the days, man. No one was saying just say no. Everyone just said yes to everything. Everything. We had everything. We even had a retired manicurist / chorus girl / kleptomaniac named Peg. Her nickname was Rye Toast Peg after her standing order. This guy on the left made a comment to me on my first day on the job. Who's that new girl? She's not much to look at, but she's got personality plus. Personality plus. That became his nickname. Political correctness was not the watchword of the day either. Even so, employees had a way of encouraging each other. For example, brilliant line cook Andy Clementi's favorite heralding cry was, "You lying whore!" Here I am with one of the other lion whores. And waiting on the notorious Peter Brady. It was like Nestor was casting his own anarchic punk opera when he hired people. Oh, and here he is performing in a play he wrote called Brass Bells at Happy Hour. Nestor's motto was, "The customer is always wrong." Has anyone here ever worked in a restaurant? Yeah? Who's dated your coworkers? Anyone? Yeah? Who's had sex with your coworkers? Yeah? Who's had sex with your coworkers in the restaurant? There you go. Who's had sex with your coworkers in the restaurant in the walk-in? Anyone? When I did this reading at the restaurant where I worked, everyone raised their hand. I think no matter how many video cameras and computers there are in a restaurant situation, no matter how many ways our corporate culture can find a way to keep tabs on us, no matter how many people are slut-shamed on social media for just doing their own thing, for trying to explore their sexuality, for just trying to figure life out, eventually we all have to rebel and just let it all hang out. So that's that. And let's see, what keynote? All right, and then hang on, I'm going to go here. And you're just going to have to bear with me for a second. Displays, arrangement. Okay. Okay, I'm ready. All right, now I'm going to read an excerpt from Over Easy. I am used to eating breakfast in restaurants. I find a certain comfort in the usual coffee shop fare: eggs swimming in grease, styrofoam toast, frozen hash browns. But when I go back to the Imperial Cafe to get my free meal, I find food heaven. Here they serve fluffy pastel yellow omelets, stuffed with wonderful fillings like crab or chicken or anything you might ask for. There's that rich, dark roast coffee with real cream, orange juice the waitress will squeeze right before your eyes, the best home fries you've ever tasted. All this and starched white napkins, too. I've never seen quality like this before. It's like my life. I was used to margarine, and now, here's butter. There's a feeling sitting at this counter that if you're here, you know something. Everything's vibrating at a higher frequency in a solid symphonic groove of rattling, clinking, steaming, frying, and nonstop chatter, the wonderful mingling perfume of bacon and high-octane coffee. Maybe it's the radio, Ksan, blaring Elvis Costello over everything, Elvis Costello, who makes the whole punk new wave thing make sense to me, because Elvis is as disgusted with this decade as I am. It's a busy weekend morning, and it's very crowded. The crowd that piles up waiting for tables is a cavalcade of hipsters. And if you know anything about hipsters, you know their signifiers tell you everything. The professional crowd is here with their blow-dried hair, patchwork leather jackets, coordinating patchwork denim jeans, silk shirts, gold disco chains, smoked aviator frames, cocaine. The punks, whom I've started noticing are everywhere, wear skinny black stovepipe jeans and black leather jackets, or try to look like 1960s English mods. Speed. The die-hard hippies, you just can't get rid of them, are in attendance. Every furry, poncho-wearing, Birkenstock-clad one of them. Pot. Usually hippies and punks are in enemy camps, but here, everyone gets along great. Drugs unite them. Well, drugs and the war on disco. Maybe it's the waitresses in their thrift store dresses, which give them the look of gorgeous, cheery Dust Bowl refugees or demented gangsters' malls, cracking wise to the customers. Maybe it's just that everyone here is so good-looking. Maybe it's that when you sit at the counter at one end, you can flirt with someone at the other end just by looking in the mirror, gazing into that reflected tableau. I want to jump in. Sitting at the counter after about 7 cups of coffee, I have a crystalline moment of pure consciousness. It comes to me. I could work here. It's what I'm meant to do. It's real life. I've buddied up to Tina, one of the waitresses. She went to CCAC too, a ceramics major. She even graduated, not like me, now officially out on my ass. Are they hiring any waitresses? You have to start as a dishwasher before you wait tables. It's the rule. But I don't know. Laszlo? Hey, doll, what's up? Suddenly dishwashing seems like the perfect occupation for me. It's real life. Orwell. You got any job openings right now? I mean, I've never worked in a restaurant before, but tell me a joke. What? Tell me a joke or a dream. If I like it, I hire you. That's the way it works. That's our policy. He's not kidding. My heart is racing. Joke or dream? They're waiting. Why did God give women legs? Why? So they wouldn't leave snail trails. Whoa! Girl, you are rank. I like that. It's true. I have an arsenal of vulgar jokes, this from hanging around my disgusting brother and his disgusting friends in high school. Hey, Frank. This is Frank Mancino. He's the owner. Madge here is going to be our new dishwasher. You start tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. You want to hear a joke? Why did God get her a W-2 form to fill out? Wait! I've never washed dishes before, but I'm very responsible. I'm a hard worker. You won't be sorry. Frank turns and looks at me like I'm nuts. Looks at Laszlo, shakes his head, and goes through the double doors. I stare at the doors flapping back and forth. I'm in. I'm no longer an art student. I am a dishwasher in a coffee shop. Nothing could sound better to me. Restaurant ware names burn a hole in my brain as I slide stacks of cups, dishes, and silverware into the Hobart. When I pull them out, the steam fogs up my glasses. I bust tables, and I scrape half-eaten eggs, toast, potatoes, and fruit rinds into the garbage can under the counter. I put the dirty dishes in the bus trays. I hoist bus tray after bus tray of dishes into the kitchen, and I load them into the dishwasher. It's my first day on the job. When I take my shift break, I'm already tired, and it's only 11:30 a.m. I order a crab sandwich because when you're working, you can order anything from the menu, anything at all, and the cooks have to make it for you. I seat myself at the counter just like a customer. I savor the real crab meat and melted cheese and tomatoes on white bread. It's grilled in butter. I could never afford the crab sandwich when I was just a customer, just a student. I know now, suddenly, staring into the mirror behind the counter, that it is never going to be the same. I'll never just be a customer here, ever again, even if I quit right here and now. I'm sitting on the other side of the counter now. My illusions are gone. The veil is lifted from mine eyes. I take a breath and decide to get used to it. As insignificant as I feel now, I can tell there is something about this place. It feels like I'm in a movie, a very interesting and exciting movie, an independent feature in which I play a small but key role. I have to stay to find out how it's going to end. The steady stream of dirty dishes finally slows to a trickle after the lunch rush. The Imperial closes at 3, and as business dwindles after 2 o'clock, the waitresses do their side work. They try to perfect their technique of consolidating the ketchup bottles by balancing one Heinz bottle on top of the other, leaning one against the counter mirror. They slice fruit for garnishing plates tomorrow. They roll silverware into linen napkins and pile them in a pyramid for the next day. They refill sugar dispensers, jam jars, napkin boxes. They passive-aggressively tidy up everything in sight around the last customers, ask them repeatedly, can I get them anything else? Sweep around their feet, finally throw their bill down, a gauntlet on the table. About 2:48, the cooks shamble out from the kitchen in their grease-stained aprons and look out the front window, peering down the block to see if anyone else is coming. They pray for people passing by not to come in the door. Everyone holds their breath. 5 minutes till, 2 minutes till, 1 minute till. Then heads swivel to watch the big hand hit the 12 on the clock on the back wall. Martha screeches, "Turn it around!" Someone races to grab the open sign in the window and turn it over to read closed. The radio's volume suddenly goes up to full blast, Mick Jagger. The cooks bend over the stove and start to vigorously scrub the blackened grill with a porous brick they call the fart block, because that's what it smells like, until the grill shines. The waitresses, done with their side work, prepare to leave one by one, freshening their lipstick in the cigarette machine mirror, brushing their hair, talking about their plans for the evening, which customers they're dating. I check my look, too. I am a troll. The cooks rip off their aprons, run their greasy fingers through their greasy hair, share a joint, wash their faces in the mop sink, and agree to meet up at the Piedmont Lounge. The payphone on the wall next to the kitchen rings. Martha answers. "Oh, hi, Ruthie." "No, honey, you just missed him." "No, he didn't say." "Okay, I will." Laszlo is meeting up with the boys at the Piedmont, too. I watch them all leave. No one invites me, but I don't care. I just want to go home and put up my feet. My whole body aches. I take the last load of dishes out of the Hobart and stack them under the prep table with a feeling of triumph. I turn around to see enormous stock pots with charred bottoms sitting in the sink. "They didn't tell you?" It's Bernardo, the prep cook with the bad skin and Coke bottle glasses, who's come in to chop stuff for the next day. I can tell Bernardo needs to be knowing, needs to pretend he's wise about something, anything more than me. He gets out the steel wool and the Ajax for me. I study the scabs on the back of his head. After I'm done rubbing my fingers raw over the pots, Bernardo shows me the mats the cooks have stood on all day. "Dishwasher's supposed to pull up the mats and take them outside, hose them off." He says this casually, going back to chopping. He can say that because this used to be his job. For him, graduating to prep cook is like a doctoral degree. I study the greasy honeycomb pattern rubber and wonder, is it the filthiest thing I've ever seen? I lean down to lift a mat, finally. I have to stick my fingers through the holes to get a grip. Gunk wedges under my nails. I meet with resistance. It seems almost cemented to the floor. I pull some more, and slowly, making a suction-y sound it gives, leaving little hexagonal cakes of compressed food and grease underneath on the floor. I stare at it for a moment. "All that crap underneath? Gotta sweep that up, too." I see the perfectly pristine prep table and the cutting board and the vegetables and think about how pleasant it would be to just stand and slice, the tactile satisfaction of knife through matter. I stagger slightly, holding this big, unwieldy thing by its length. It's like a big, horrible tongue trying to curl itself around me. Bernardo is back to me, says, "Roll it up." I lay it back down and do just that. Then I stand and lift it. It's heavy, and I am forced to waltz it in a close, greasy embrace across the restaurant, grimacing as I go to avoid dragging a slimy trail on the floor. Outside, the daylight is so intense I can hardly see. Squinting, I let go of the mat. It flops on the sidewalk. I stagger to the side of the building, where I blindly feel for the hose and faucet. When my eyes adjust, I can see that under a June sun, the Oakland sky is still that purpley blue, that blue I just can't get over, that blue that saturates the stucco pinks, greens, and yellows of all those tidy little Oakland houses that go on for miles and miles, a candy box city full of pastel creams. The sun mocks me. Look what you've missed, it says. By now, soaking wet, I'm afraid to face the all-knowing Bernardo again. Sure enough, back inside, he says in a dry monotone, "They tell you have to mop the floor out front?" The floor is a black and red linoleum checkerboard. I wonder just how clean I'm supposed to get it. I decide, not very. I drag the mop around under the booths and tables, slurpy. Parts of the linoleum are worn away, down to the cement. While I rinse the mop in the sink, I wonder what torture Bernardo will have for me next, but he says, "You can have your shift beer." I pull a Dos Equis out of the fridge and sit alone at the counter. It slides icily down my throat. Nothing has ever tasted better. I sit for a while in a wonderfully beery haze. It's 5 p.m. I leave, limp. I catch the 5158 to Berkeley and sit numbly, a pariah of Greece, on the bus as it inches up College Avenue. I get off at Derby Street and walk a half block to the big gray house I share with a bunch of UC Berkeley students. As I put the key in the lock, I hear them down the hall in the kitchen in a heated debate about Sinn Féin or the Faroe Islands or something utterly irrelevant to my new working-class life. As I open the door, they pop their heads out like anxious parents and ask, "How did it go?" I burst into tears. And that's all. Isn't my desktop? Thank you. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Just kind of aesthetically, was the palette of your book, did you choose just the green kind of maybe to keep the cost down, or was it like a deliberate kind of choice to make everything this blue, greeny color?
Well, I was partly to keep the cost down because I knew doing it full color would not only be very expensive, but also really even more labor intensive. And the restaurant itself, I don't know if you noticed in some of the pictures I showed previously, but the restaurant was green, mostly green and red, and I just like that shade of green. Yes?
About your process of writing it, like was it hard to kind of sort through and pick out what parts of your
Yeah, it was really hard. Actually, I initially wrote it as a conventional piece of fiction. I thought there's no way I could ever do this as a graphic novel. It's too much work. No one could do that much drawing. It's crazy. And so I wrote it, and my agent couldn't sell it, and I finally just kind of had to. Actually, what happened was there was one editor who looked at the manuscript and said, "Has she ever thought of doing this as a graphic novel?" And I got so mad. I was like, "Oh, the nerve of that woman! Oh, who does she think she knows I'm a cartoonist. If I wanted to do it as a comic book, I'd do it that way. And it was like, I was like, okay, she struck a nerve." And I finally just had to break down and admit to myself that that's what it wanted to be. So it was actually the writing of it, the manuscript, was tremendously labor-intensive and took me years of going back and forth. I started writing it when I was about 37 or 38, or maybe 39, and I would go from Los Angeles. I would make trips up to Oakland and interview all my old coworkers, most of whom did not work in the restaurant anymore. But I talked to many of them and took down a lot of their stories, took a lot of notes, and then winnowing down the characters from the huge cast of people who worked there over the years, because there was so many people that came through that place, was difficult too. So there was a lot of amalgamation and compression of people and events. So, like 10 fry cooks became like 3 fry cooks, and like 8 waitresses became like 4 waitresses. And there's a few people who stand out who were like very specifically themselves, but just about everyone else is kind of an amalgam. Yeah.
I'm guessing you were quite young when you started working, like maybe in your 20s or so that you started working in the...
Yeah, I was about 22.
So that's a pretty
I think I did because, well, it was I was very close friends with the manager, Nestor, a.k.a. Laszlo, and he and I, he was a brilliant writer. And another part of the book that's really important is that after I left, after working there for 4 years and moved to New York to become an illustrator and cartoonist, he and I corresponded, and he was a really wonderful correspondent, and he was still working there, and he would tell me all the latest gossip. So a lot of that stuff wound up in the book as well. And he and I had talked about collaborating on some kind of project about the restaurant, and sadly he died before that could happen, and it was just hard to rein it in. And it wasn't until my son was born in 1992 that I kind of had this big epiphany about what it really was about, which was that Nestor was someone who had small children, but spent a lot of his time out drinking and doing drugs with a bunch of 20-somethings. He was like a good 15 years older than us. And instead of being home with his family, he was out, carousing with this bunch of young ne'er-do-wells. And, after my son was born, I was like, well, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. Why would you want to, do anything but be with your kids? Because this is this is it. And I was like, oh, okay, so he's not like the perfect guru beatnik dad I thought he was. He's much more complicated. I mean, he wasn't a terrible father. He was just more complicated and dark than I had realized. Because I think when you're in your 20s, you just, unless you have a lot of responsibility forced on you at the point, you're young and footloose, so you have no idea of what that kind of responsibility means. So none of us ever gave it a thought.
Sorry, I see you started the Q&A. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right.
Does anyone else have any questions for Mimi that they'd like to say into the important microphone?
I probably don't need the microphone. I just
Okay,
wanted
go
to
ahead.
ask about your work in television, how you moved over to The Simpsons. That sounds a big jump.
Yeah, well, my husband is Wayne White, and now he's a painter, but he was a production designer on Pee-wee's Playhouse, and he became friends with Gary Panter, who, I don't know if you all know Gary Panter, the cartoonist. And Gary and Wayne and another artist, Rick Heitzman, all worked on the production design and puppet design for Pee-wee's Playhouse. After the first season, which was shot in New York, they shot the subsequent seasons in L.A. While we were in L.A., Gary introduced us to Matt Groening, who at that point was still living in a shack in Venice. I mean, literally a shack. And so we became friends with him, and he was asking his cartoonist friends if they wanted to write for this new show he was going to do. And I guess I was the only one of his cartoonist friends who said yes. Everyone else was like, oh, TV, poo-poo. And I was like, oh, I'll do that. And so that's how that came about.
So did you write multiple episodes?
No, I did not. Would you like to know why?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was a boys' club. It was a complete boys' club, and they didn't want any women on staff, so I was not invited to be on staff. And that's a fact of Hollywood that exists to this day. So I don't want to sound all bitter and stuff, but I'm sort of tired of trying to, be quiet about it, so.
Was Designing Woman different?
It was different. It was a much more welcoming environment. They were lovely to me. Unfortunately, it was the last season of the show. Linda Bloodworth, who created the show, it was 1992. Linda Bloodworth was off winning the election for Bill Clinton. The inmates were running the asylum. They'd used up all the good ideas for episodes. I had just had my first child. They let me bring him and the nanny to work. No one really wanted to be there. I wasn't getting any sleep. I'd never worked on a TV show on a staff before. It was all kind of a big nightmare. So, and I just slowly began to realize that I was really not cut out for collaborative work in television, just by nature of my play well with others' personality. So I have written some screenplays and monkeyed around with other stuff. I wrote an episode of Pee-wee's Playhouse, which was what I wrote before I even wrote The Simpsons, and I wrote it with Miss Yvonne, the most beautiful lady in Puppetland, Lynn Stewart. And the trouble with that was that it ruined me for writing for television, because here's what they did. They took our script and they shot it. And that never happens. That never happens. They take your script and 10 other people look at it and they completely take it apart, and everyone has a turn pissing on it, and then they reassemble it, and they if you're lucky, they say, "Hey, your script's great. We're gonna shoot it next week," and you're like, "I what?" So it's the nature of the beast. That's Hollywood.
I actually have a question for you, Mimi, and it's going back a bit more to Over Easy, and I hope I haven't repeated something that someone already asked, but I just wonder, when you're writing something that's sort of a memoir and it's about real people, like I assume everyone in Over Easy is either, an amalgam of a real person you knew or based on a real person. I'm just wondering, how do you go back sort of in terms of your writing process, in terms of memory and remembering these, because everyone's so well realized, like how did you remember what they were all about and their characteristics and everything like that? Like, how did you create these people? Well,
they were fabulously vivid characters to begin with, so it wasn't hard to remember them. What I didn't remember, there was stuff that Nestor wrote to me and related these stories and quoted people in such a wonderful way that I was able to use that as well. I mean, it's funny because I went, before that I was in art school for 3 years, and after that I went to New York, but it's like my most vivid memories are of that particular period. I mean, people say, "Oh, you should do something about being in New York in the 80s." And I was like, "Why? I was happy. There's there's no conflict there. There's no like drama. It was all just like me getting to do what I wanted to do." So there was, I mean, it was, I don't think I tried not to sentimentalize it, because there was a lot of it that was kind of awful, and I don't know if you realize I'm working on the second part of Over Easy, that is coming out in 2016. So it does get darker, but I mean, I didn't want to sentimentalize the time because there was a lot about it. I mean, basically it was kind of like the whole pearl and the oyster thing. I mean, you're in this environment that's really irritating, but that sand is like polishing you into something.
You also have 2 children who are in art school or just completing art school, as I understand. Because of your relationship with art school and sort of how it almost took you going into the world and working a real job to understand and unleash your sort of, your artistic future in a way and realize your own potential. What do you tell your kids about art school, and do you have dialogues with them about sort of what their future paths should hold, or do you kind of just let them figure it out for themselves?
No, I mean, our son is a brilliant painter. He's just always been both of them have always, since the time they could pick up a pencil, been incredible artists. And our son actually just graduated from California College of the Arts, which is where I went to school back when it was called California College of Arts and Crafts. And he's followed his own path, but he's still sort of torturing himself in that way that I think just about everyone who goes to art school does, who they see what other people are producing, and I think maybe they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Maybe they're supposed to be doing it in the style of what everyone else is doing that seems to be popular at the time, even though they know in their heart of hearts that what they're doing is much better. They're like, he's like insecure about like, this is what they're all doing, and I think it's crap. But what am I doing? And what should I be doing? And I'm like, just keep doing what you're doing. So, yeah. So it's that's just the way it goes with especially once you're out of art school and you're out in the world at large. You kind of like, I think you I mean, there were a lot of people who went to my art school who wound up working in that restaurant, and I saw a lot of people's, art careers, quote unquote, just fall by the wayside. And I think it's just, it's going to be that way no matter what job you take when you leave school. And in order to assert yourself as an artist in the world, you just have to want it really badly. You just have to find a way to keep doing it, no matter what your day job is. So, I mean, that's just, no one's going to come and hand you that career on a platter. You have to fight for it. And that's part of the process, is part of being an artist in the world is, I mean, it's a constant fight of asserting your identity as an artist against everyone else out there who has chosen just to go to, get a degree and then try to work in the corporate world, and they're looking at you like, who do you think you are? And you're like, I'm an artist, and fuck you. I mean, it's kind of, it's almost that like a battle in a way to do that, because you're just going to get that from family, from friends, from everyone who's just like, what makes you think you deserve to do that, and how dare you? And you have to just dare. Yeah. Well, I think it's harder now. I mean, back then you could make a living doing it, I mean, people paid, magazines and newspapers paid you actual money. No one said to you, it'd be really good exposure for you to be in our magazine. We can't pay you anything, but we think you're great. I mean, they paid you, and they paid you handsomely. And there was far more venues for comics than there was. I mean, not just the National Lampoon, the Village Voice, Adweek, 17. I mean, lots of magazines were running comic strips, and then that just kind of dried up and blew away, and then all those magazines dried up and blew away. And now it's there's almost nothing left, and the New Yorker is the only magazine left almost that publishes single-panel comics. I mean, that's not something I ever really did, but it's there were legions of single-panel cartoonists who worked all the time, and that's just almost completely gone now. Oh, yes.
So right now, what are some artists or comic? Right now, what are some artists or illustrators or comic artists that you enjoy right now?
Oh, I love Vanessa Davis. I love Seth. Dan Clowes, of course. Durf Backdurf, who is just amazing. He did a book a couple of years ago called My Friend Dahmer, about going to high school. He actually went to high school with Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer, and he's just put out a really great book called Punk Rock and Trailer Parks, about growing up in the late 70s in suburban Akron, Ohio, and going to punk clubs. And he's working on a full-length version of a shorter comic he did about working as a garbage man when he was 19. That's really great. His stuff's fantastic. Joyce Farmer. What was the other one? Oh, of course, Roz Chast's graphic novel about caring for her elderly parents. I just read that. That was fantastic. There's so much stuff out there now.
I think we have time for one more question before we wrap it up. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to ask me? Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering what you think, sorry, now that I'm talking, how much does the time we're born into and the time we live in shape us as people, and was that part of what you were trying to explore with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it absolutely shapes you. It was, I mean, everyone's experience shapes them. I mean, my parents were shaped from having grown up in the Depression that turned them into like incredible tightwads who like scrimped and save and can't throw anything away. And the thing about the 70s was that I was still like ragingly far more sexist. And there was just this like really casual sexism that people that everyone just took for granted. Like guys were going to grope you in this jokey way, and especially in a restaurant, in an environment like that, it's like no one talked about sexual harassment. It was just like you either like told them where to get off, or you let them do it if you liked them. It was just. So you could, I mean, with women's liberation was big then, so you could assert yourself and stuff, but there was just, like, men were really still not really listening to it. They'd sort of, like, pay lip service, or they'd just sort of go blah, 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 blah. So, but you were just on fire with it anyway, and I was just determined that I was going to go do what I set out to do. And part of it was like I was feeling invisible, but that was sort of liberating because it just also meant that nobody was watching me, so I could just do what I wanted to do without attracting any attention. So there wasn't like any expectations. So I just like made up my mind. I'm going to save up my money. I'm going to move to New York. I'm not going to be a waitress all my life. I'm not going to get caught in this loop of like waitressing and then going to the bar at night, which is like a big hazard of restaurant work, because like people who work in restaurants have a lot of cash going through their hands all the time, and they're like tired at the end of the day, and they just think, oh, fuck it, I'm going to buy a bundle of Coke. Like, that's your first mistake. And so I just, I could see that happening all around me, and I just made up my mind I was going to have this goal, and something about not having anyone taking it seriously kind of made it easier for me to do it. I know that sounds odd, but it did. Does that answer your question?
I think we're going to wrap it up with that. I just like a round of applause for Mimi. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all for coming out.